Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, or you're streaming the show on either one of those stations' digital streaming apps. Both are free to download, both are free to use, and they are both sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. And the alternative ways, especially if you're an avid Extra Sports 1300 listener, they come in handy. And just know that those things are being attended to by our crack engineer, and hopefully we'll have those things remedied. But we're aware, and we don't like it. It will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics over the course of the program today. Love to get your thoughts. 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show that way, or if you are watching the live stream of this show anywhere you scroll, you could just drop a comment right there. I'm going to say this, and I am going to be ready to be absolutely wrong as soon as Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. But I don't think we're ever going to get a game or the type of game that maybe we expected going into the Stanley Cup Final. I don't think we're ever going to get it. And you know who agrees with me? Rod Brindamore, the head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Maybe it is going to look like this. I don't know. It's not what we, I think, all thought it would be coming into this, but now that we're into it, whatever, 4 games deep, tough to control them. So we're doing our best we can. That's the best way I can put it.
It has been just, can you remember a Stanley Cup final that has delivered like this one? Because let me be clear about this. I am not complaining to open the show today. I'm just saying we're never going to get what we thought we were going to get out of Vegas and Carolina. All of these games, I've decided, are now just, we're past the halfway point of this series. We've played more games than we have left in this series. I think it's fair to say this is just the form that this Stanley Cup final has taken. And that the form that this Stanley Cup final has taken is one that is completely off the rails. We can't go a single game without a team jumping out to a multiple goal lead and then giving up that multiple goal lead and then coming back and the team's trading goals. It's been everything that you would love for it to be, but nothing like what you expected it to be. I think that's the way I'll put it. And again, not a complaint. It's been awesome. And with Carolina's win last night, one where they jumped out to a 2-0 lead, then we're up 2-1, then went up 3-1, then coughed up the lead only to take it back courtesy of Jordan Staal in the third period. Empty netter made it 5-3, and that was the final score. But it's just, we're not going to go a game that isn't going to be these wild swings. And both teams are trying their best to limit those. And you can understand why, right? Hockey, we don't talk about as a game of runs like we talk about the basketball being a game of runs. In basketball, it's almost inevitable that a team's going to go on a 7-0, 9-0, 13-0 run at some point during the game. There's just not enough defense that is played in the league nowadays. And nowadays, the players are too good. They're too good as shooters. It's going to happen. But at the same time, one team can get hot, the other team can get cold. you understand the dynamics at work here on why we see so many runs in the NBA. We're not supposed to get that in hockey. The first couple goals of the game are supposed to matter. The first couple goals of every game of this series don't matter in the end, because there's so much more scoring that's going to happen between that time and the end of the game. But it's awesome. And it has made for one of the more compelling Stanley Cup finals in recent memory. Rod Brindamore doesn't like it. I know Torts doesn't like it either.
The frustrating part for me is they don't earn their winning goal. It's not so much the turnover. Carter makes a great save, but just after that, we make another mistake and we leave the front of the net. So, yeah. So there are a lot of good minutes in the game. It's just for free.
And that kind of echoes the same sentiment that Ron Brindamore had the other day about Mitch Marner's hat trick. He thought that they gave Mitch Marner at least part of his hat trick. Like, they didn't make it difficult on him. And the whole premise of both Vegas and Carolina was that they make it incredibly difficult on their opponents to score. They take away time and space, tight checking, charging hard on the forecheck, all of these good on special teams, like all of these things that both teams have been this entire time has completely gone out the window. And it's just absolute madness for 60 minutes. And sometimes, as Game 3 was evident, longer than that. But it's been absolutely compelling. You can't take your eyes off of these games that are going on. And even when a team gets up by a couple goals, you're like, this isn't going to last. In fact, the most surprising thing about last night's game was that Vegas, after they scored their first goal, didn't immediately score another one. Like, we're getting so spoiled in this series that a goal is scored and 90 seconds go by and we're like, where the hell's the other goal? I was promised more goals. These goals come in bunches. Where are they? But it's been pure chaos in the best way possible. And for the most part, and certainly last night would be evidence of this, it's not the big boys. I know Mitch Marner, had his hat trick in Game 3, and Mitch Marner is probably going to win the Conn Smythe. Certainly if Vegas wins. I'm saying probably even if Carolina wins this series, Mitch Marner, because of how good he's been. But Eichel's been a little quiet. We know that what's gone on with Jarvis and Aho. One thing that I was looking to test out after Game 3 was, okay, now does Aho and Jarvis and Svechnikov get going? And the answer is no. Nope. That was just that game. That was just that goal. But Jared Bednar has talked about this, right? When you get in these series and the teams are so evenly matched, the big boys cancel each other out. Right? And then it gets down to 37-year-old Jordan Staal being the hero, scoring not only the goal to make it 3-1, to respond after Mark Stone scored first for Vegas, but he comes back and scores that goal that John Tortorella feels like Vegas gave them for free. And I'm with John Tortorella. Like, Jordan Staal had no one within 5 feet of him. Like, Vegas, I think the Ray Ferraro described it on the ABC broadcast, was it looked like a Vegas team photo. They all swarmed Jarvis. And Jordan Stahl was just hanging out. And how is Carter Hart supposed to make that save? But that encapsulates what's going on in this series. Both of these teams are like completely losing their minds. Right? They're not sticking to any of their principles. They're not doing anything that has gotten them to this point. The moment, I don't want to say the moment's too big, but the enormity of the moment is just guys are just going with the flow and like, okay, this is what the game's going to be. It doesn't seem like anyone's making any meaningful adjustments mentally or tactically to make this thing buckle down and become a 3-2-2-1 hockey game that we kind of expected these games to be with Carolina and Vegas. It's just like, okay, it's high scoring. I think both teams come out in the first period pretty well overall, right? Things don't get too crazy in the first period of these games. But teams, and last night it's Carolina, but one of these teams kind of breaks through. Maybe they break through a couple of times and then the script goes completely out the window. And one of the craziest things about this series, the first team to figure out it, if Vegas figures out the second period, or I'm sorry, if Vegas figures out the third period or Carolina figures out the second period, the team that does that is going to win this series. How do you explain Carolina getting thoroughly pummeled repeatedly in the second period of all of these games, only for them to do the pummeling of Vegas in the third? Vegas owns the second period. It's almost become really, and in that way, in the way I'm thinking, maybe the first couple of goals of the game do matter. They don't matter to say that they'll stand up and be the only goal scored in the game, but they matter because it's like the second is going to be so decidedly in Vegas's favor. The third is going to be so decidedly in Carolina's favor that it's like whoever wins the first period is winning the game. And Carolina won the first period. So it's either that, it's either the team that wins the first period of game 7, because that's where it seems like we're heading. The team that wins the first period of game 7 is going to win the game, or it's we see Carolina mitigate some of the damage in the second period, or Vegas be able to do the same thing in the third. But it's like there's very little rhyme and reason to what's going on in this series, which has made it incredibly fun. But we're now 2-2. The series going back to Carolina. I think even though the team split the 2 games of the series in Vegas, like Vegas got one too, right? I think the Vegas portion of this series, games 3 and 4, are wins for Carolina. Right? Because last night they actually get the win, but I think the way that game 3 ended, I know it was a, weird bounce with Shea Theodore's goal, but the ability for Carolina to rally the way they did in Vegas's barn. I'm not into moral victories, but something very close to that happened for the Hurricanes. They had to get some confidence out of that game. And then it just builds with your ability to come back the next night and win the game. And now you're going home. It's a best of 3 series. You got 2 of the 3 in your barn. Some of the worries that you may have had earlier on this series are gone because Carter Hart's not going to stand on his head like that run for. And I'm not saying Carter Hart's playing terribly in this series, but there were times against Colorado where Carter Hart was, stealing the game. Game 1 being the biggest example of it. Carolina has had very little issue beating Carter Hart. So I think the more confident group right now has to be Carolina. And we'll see what that gets them as the series goes back to Raleigh tomorrow night. But another crazy one. How about Jordan Stahl? Played in the NHL. I believe he's 37 years old. I believe Jordan Stahl has been playing in the NHL for 35 years. It's been a long time. And he's playing the role of hero in an absolutely crucial Game 4 that Carolina had to get. That's the fact of the matter. Carolina had to get that game, and they did. And we haven't even talked about the goaltending from Carolina's side, which may be 1B if 1A is, just the game itself. 1B, how about the goaltending situation for Carolina? Rod Brindamore made the decision I thought he should make. I don't think he made it for the reasons that I was making the case for Brandon Bussey. And what's that going to look like moving forward? So much more from Game 4. Again, Carolina with a 5-3 win. That series is tied at 2 games apiece. And if you are not watching, I'm not a paid endorser for hockey or the NHL. I'm just a fan. If you're not watching this series, what are you doing with your evenings? Because this has been a blast. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. Coming up next, Game 4 of the NBA Finals is tonight, and why I don't like the vibe around the New York Knicks right now, and the city of New York for that matter. Father's Day is coming up. You know he's got ties. You know he's got socks. How about you give him a gift that really rocks? $5,000 with our Top Pop contest. Head to extrasports1300.com or kvor.com to enter this national contest for your chance to win $5,000 for your Top Pop, sponsored locally by Papa Murphy's Pizza. We make it. You bake it. Tom throws in a text message at 719-247-1313, and I'm going to read it because it leads perfectly into what I'm going to talk about right now. Tom says, do you still think everyone is rooting for the Knicks because they're such a great story after seeing what the idiot fans did the other night? I'll give a brief answer to that and say yes. I do still think that there are, I don't know that it's strong. Is there any, well, there's starting to be some anti-Wemby sentiment popping up. I'll talk about that. But I don't know that people went into it, you know, if it were OKC in New York, it'd be a different story, right? I think there are plenty of people that would be just fine with Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs winning a title. But I do think that more objective parties would probably like the Knicks story. I was even asked this question yesterday by a coworker of mine, and I kind of gave that answer. It doesn't bother me either way. I'm not rooting for one team or another, but I mean, the Knicks would be a great story after so many years winning a title. So I guess I was kind of in that mix, and I'm not changing my mind based on what is happening with some of the Knicks fans' behavior. And I'm sorry, I know all Knicks fans are not this way. We always have to throw out that caveat, but I'm sorry, they're representing you. We have to call them Knicks fans. You're attacking San Antonio fans. You're not, and it's a minority of it, but what else are we supposed to call them? Rogue agents? Like, they're Knicks fans. And what they're doing is not okay, but it leads right into what I want to talk about. I hate the entire air around the New York Knicks and the city of New York and their fan base right now. It's terrible. They lost one game. They're still up 2-1 in the series, and everybody is acting like the Knicks just lost the NBA Finals or are on the verge of losing it. There's never a good reason to attack a fan of another team. It's pathetic behavior. We think sports are very serious. We take sports seriously. But come on, most rational people don't have the urge to like physically assault another human being over the outcome of a sporting event. But it's a part of the bigger picture here, which is like the Knicks, the city of New York, and the fan base is like collapsing. And I don't mean like, I just mean their feelings around the emotions around this series are like if they lost the entire series. You have Mike Brown, who is pulling the ripcord on the criticizing referee stuff after a game that nobody was talking about, or I should say most people weren't talking about the free throw disparity or looking at that game like the Spurs were getting every single call. So I thought that was a misstep by Mike Brown. He's complaining about officiating. Knicks fans are whining about Wembanyama being able to play in this game and not being assessed a flagrant. I guess he wouldn't be necessarily suspended if he got a flagrant, but they wanted him suspended for what he did to Jalen Brunson. And then you have the behavior of Spurs fans getting jumped and physically assaulted because they had the audacity to wear a Spurs jersey in the city of New York. Like, get a hold of yourself. And I mean that for everybody. And like, people are blaming President Trump for the loss in Game 3 because he sucked all the energy out of the building. Like, you've waited 27 years. And I'm not his biggest fan by any stretch of the imagination, but at some point you're watching a basketball game. Do you feel his presence behind you, that it's casting a pall over the proceedings? Like, you've waited 27 years for that moment. I understand the complaining and having to go through the TSA lines, but once the ball goes up in the air and the game gets going, like, focus on what's in front of you. It's a disaster, and they lost one game in a series they're still up 2-1. And the biggest story out of Game 3 is that the Knicks in the second half weren't even close to the team they've been throughout the playoffs. Like, I could easily look at the second half of that Game 3 and go and totally dismiss it as a work of fiction. How many games have the New York Knicks played in these playoffs? They didn't look anything like they did in the second half. That wasn't them. Karl Anthony Towns talked about it. That's not them. That's not how they got here. So you could easily dismiss. I don't even know why you're sweating it, Knick fan. Why are you worried about it? You're in a good spot still. You got a cushion. You can bounce back tonight and take a stranglehold on the series. Like, Mike Brown's melting down, the fan base is melting down, the city is melting down. But to Tom's point, it's like, my gosh, maybe we shouldn't have New York teams playing for championships. If this is going to be the result, my goodness. I shudder to think what New York will be like if the New York Jets ever get their act together and are competing for a Super Bowl. Like, it's okay. You're okay, New York Knicks fans, Mike Brown. You're fine. You're making this into a bigger thing than it has to be. But at the root of it, I wonder. Okay, because on the surface, everything is fine. Knicks are still up 2-1. They get Game 4 at home tonight. Chance to take a stranglehold on the series, all this kind of stuff. But I'm starting to piece all these things together. And someone can correct me if I'm off base on this. Some of this behavior is as if the Knicks have lost the series, because I wonder if there is real feeling in and around the Knicks that, oh no, the Spurs have figured it out. Oh no, the Spurs could actually be up 3-0 on us right now. Because it was always, San Antonio was always the more talented team in this series. They were always the more talented team. Doesn't mean better. Doesn't mean better because they, Wemby with the turnover late in Game 2 and allowing the Knicks to come back from 14 down on your home floor. Like, that's not the sign of being the better team. but San Antonio was always more talented. So if you're calling for Wemby, and I think he should have been called for a foul too. Like, I'm with you. Like, that was a foul. But I don't want the guy suspended. Come on now. Somebody has to really tell me how much more egregious what Wemby did than what Josh Hart did with Luke Cornett. Like, this is good. We want some physicality. We want some animosity. I get it. When it happens to your guy, you don't like it. I'm not saying you have to like it, but like the idea that this series is getting a little physical. Because, by the way, that favors New York. That favors New York. You think that the New York Knicks have any chance at doing anything against Victor Wembanyama if the referees are going to call everything? They have no chance to stop Wemby. They have to be physical. Again, you don't like that it's Jalen Brunson being thrown down to the floor, and I understand that. But if the referees aren't going to call that as a foul, because in their mind they're going to let the teams play, I guess, you should want that. You should embrace that. The New York Knicks have to be the more physical team to counteract the talent that San Antonio has over them. And that's what they did in game 2, or the first 2 games, I should say. They put pressure, both, physical pressure, defending and things like that, but mental pressure as well. And it was San Antonio that folded in games 1 and 2. And then for some reason, the Knicks were just out to lunch in the second half and allowed San Antonio to win that game. But now what I'm seeing after is far more troubling than what anything I saw in game 2 or game 3, excuse me. The reaction to game 3 has been much worse than anything that actually happened in game 3. So, I mean, is it too much to say the winner of tonight's game is going to win the series? I think that's kind of where I'm at. I think the Knicks will be better tonight. And I think they'll use, and that's what makes Mike Brown's whining after game 3 make even less sense. Because I think tonight the Knicks want to retaliate against Victor Wembanyama. You should be taking what happened in game 3 and going, okay, we can do this too. Not saying start a brawl or pull Lou Dort on anybody, but hit Wemby. Good physical basketball, the type of basketball that we grew up on. Don't complain about the officiating and get the officials to look even closer and call the game even tighter. You don't want that. Push back tonight. The Spurs push back in game 3. It's now the Knicks' turn. When you win 13 games in a row, yeah, at some point it's going to come to an end. Better now than in a game 7. You have all the time in the world to recover. You're still at home. But I find all of this from the Knicks, the Knicks fans, the city of New York to be very troubling. Now, what's happening on the streets of New York is troubling at a different level. But I'm just saying, if all of this is emblematic of this collective mind that everyone with the Knicks has, in and around the Knicks has, it's not promising. They're acting like they lost the whole series. Maybe they did. Maybe they're realizing that San Antonio is the better team. We'll see tonight. 6:30 tip in game 4. Knicks win. They got a 3-1 lead. Spurs win. It's 2-2 going back to San Antonio. 719-24-7, 13-13 back after this. PBR Space Cowboys is coming to Falcon Stadium on June 20th, combining elite team bull riding and a live concert by Grammy award-winning superstar Tim McGraw, as well as multi-platinum country star Chris Jansen. You can get your tickets if you go to extrasports1300.com or kvor.com. You got the graphic or the artwork for the event. It's not just a concert. It's an event, extravaganza, if I may. You can click that and it'll take you right to the ticket buying website. It is going to be a lot different next year watching Denver Nuggets basketball games, as today Chris Marlowe and Scott Hastings were told, and Chris Dempsey for that matter. Don't want to forget Chris's role in the altitude broadcast, are all not going to be on the broadcast next year. And gosh, Marlowe's been doing it for, I think, 22 years. And I really like Scott Hastings. I mean, Scott Hastings is probably one of my favorite game analysts. I think he is somebody that's not afraid to tell it like it is, even though deep down he wants the Denver Nuggets to win, but he's willing to point out if something is off or they're not doing this or not doing that. And that's why I think a lot of broadcasts sometimes get too into the we're going to be waving pom-poms and rah, rah, rah the whole time. And I just think Scott Hastings is a smart basketball guy, played in the NBA, and Chris Marlowe is really good at what he does as a play-by-play guy. And the few times I've gone to interact with him, he's just the best human being. So you absolutely hate to see any of this happening, and we'll see what the altitude broadcast crew looks like next year. But my kind of thought after the initial, like, man, that really sucks that those guys are going to be off of those broadcasts starting next year, is, I mean, is this not a harbinger of things to come this offseason for the Denver Nuggets organization? I mean, we're going to pick back up that discussion here once the NBA finals are up and what the Nuggets should or should not do. And there's this cloud hanging over that this offseason may just be about cost-cutting measures, which is kind of what happened today. And I don't, not intertwined into that business. I don't know. Businesses do have to make difficult decisions at times, but this to me is a sign that what you kind of thought was coming this offseason for the Denver Nuggets is going to happen. This offseason is going to be about adding. This is going to be about subtracting. And Nuggets fans aren't going to like that, especially when you see, and we had this discussion in the wake of Myles Garrett going to the LA Rams. You see other cronky sports properties that are making huge moves, and Arsenal being the fourth highest payroll in the Premier League and winning a Premier League title. And you're looking at some of these other things and saying, well, why do the Nuggets have to not just get under the second apron? And again, I will continue to say it. There are arguments to be made that it's not a good idea to be in the second apron. We're talking about something entirely different. We're talking something that is not nearly as restrictive when it comes to the way you build your roster, and more about just an owner wanting to save money. Getting out of the repeater tax is just about money. Second apron carries a whole bunch of other stuff to it. And again, I've said that I don't know that it's the best idea for the Denver Nuggets to be in the second apron, but The feeling I have is they're not stopping there. And it's just going to be who are they losing, not who's coming in. I mean, inevitably, they're going to have to fill the roster spots. But the idea that this team is going to, make this big all-in type of move, I don't think it's in the cards. And it is frustrating when you see the other Kroenke teams that quite frankly, you don't care about in LA and Arsenal, and I don't blame you for not caring about them. Care about the Avs, you care about the Nuggets. But the answer to why them and not Nuggets and Avalanche, it's simple. Everything is tied together. They're not all out on their own islands. They don't operate independently. When investments are being made in one, that money has to come from somewhere. And it's why Stan Kroenke is a great businessman and has made himself a ton of money. You can't dispute how successful it's been. And, he's won championships in every sport. But every team has a time. Right? It's the Rams' time. It's Arsenal's time. They're going to get the most attention. They're going to be able to make the all-in moves. And meanwhile, the Avalanche and the Denver Nuggets are going to have to kind of be, I'll say the Avalanche status quo, Nuggets, trimming payroll. It's the way it goes. And they've won titles in everything. But when your team is not the one that's getting the extra attention, if we want to call it that, it is frustrating when you're seeing another franchise in their empire getting all the attention and being able to do all of these things. But it's hard for me to not take it as a sign of what's to come when it comes time to make some basketball decisions. But we'll see what comes of all of that. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on that. Again, Chris Marlowe, Scott Hastings, and Chris Dempsey all out from the Nuggets broadcast this upcoming season. I have not seen anything on Katie Winge, which maybe tells me that she's going to be a big part of that. And that's a good thing. She's very good as well, but I like the whole crew. So tough. And I'm in the business. Okay, you want to call it a different level, whatever, fine. But I understand it, and this is a bit of this is going around. It's unfortunate. You just wonder, because the same guy owns, they're not a rights holder. Like, they're under the umbrella. It's Altitude, it's Arsenal, it's the Rams, it's the Nuggets, it's the Avalanche, it's Ball Arena. It's all of this stuff. It's all under the same umbrella. It's all connected. So it's hard for me to not look at this and say that maybe it's the basketball team is going to make some decisions similar to this coming up this offseason. Again, take your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Just putting this out there. I know it's more of a New York thing right now because there are fans that are, wanting to be at watch parties because heaven knows a lot of them can't afford to be in the building. But apparently they're limiting the They're doing a lot of the same things they did when the president went to the game, but it's in reaction to, I think, what is going on. And it's, Dan Patrick said it this morning in all sincerity. I talked about it from more the basketball sense that maybe the vibe around this team is such that they believe that they've lost this series. But Dan took it to a more real world part of it and a more serious and important part of it. He said legitimately he's worried about New York, win or lose. It's not good. We've waited 20. We haven't had the Knicks and New York in the NBA Finals in 27 years. It's not going well, and a lot of it doesn't have a lot to do with basketball, which is the more unfortunate aspect of all of this. Hopefully tonight's better, and everyone can just take a deep breath and remember that this is sports and it's fun, and let's not do really stupid stuff. 719-247-1313 coming up next. More on the Hurricanes' big win in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. Welcome in. Thanks for stopping by. Shouts to those of you watching the show anywhere you scroll at Extra Sports 1300 at 740 KVOR, or if you're following me on Instagram at Ginge Watch. While you're there, feel free to like, subscribe, follow. Every site has its own word for it. And most importantly, comment, because this is an interactive experience. If you are listening to the show, you could call or text in at 719-247-1313. Last night, another absolute beauty of a hockey game. Can't get enough of this Stanley Cup final. And with the Hurricanes winning last night, it seems like the end is not in sight. Feels like we're going to get 7 as the Carolina Hurricanes have to stave off a furious Vegas rally, of course, in the second period, because that's where Vegas scores all of their goals, it seems, or at least the vast majority. Jordan Stahl gets what proved to be the game winner, empty netter, boom, 5-3. Carolina ties the series at 2 games apiece going to Raleigh. But as I expected, and certainly as I thought should be the case, the Carolina Hurricanes made a change in goal. And I thought that the goaltending, I thought there were big saves that were made in that game. I don't think overall it was, one of the better goaltender. I don't think we've gotten one of the better goaltender performances we've seen from either goalie in any game of this series. It's just the way the series has been. The idea that one of these guys is going to steal a game, it seems far less likely every day that goes by. It seems like these are just going to be high-scoring games because these teams, the players in front of the goalies just can't get their act together. There are massive defensive breakdowns from both teams leading to some of these goals. But all you can ask is that can you make timely saves? I think that's where we're at with these goalies. Can you make a timely save to stifle a team's momentum, to give your team some momentum in the game? And I thought that Brandon Bussey did. I thought he made some big saves overall. Maybe not the performance he hoped and dreamed he would have, but hey, he started his first Stanley Cup final game. And this is a guy that was an undrafted rookie free agent. I guess a weird thing with hockey that you can age out of being a rookie, which he has. But first year in the NHL, undrafted guy, has played well for Carolina this season, but hasn't been the guy. That's been Frederik Andersen. Comes in at kind of in that fireman role, the way that game 3 was going, and I thought he played well, and I thought he earned himself another start. And he got that start last night, and I thought he performed certainly well enough to win the hockey game. And I think that's in your first start. Like, you'd all like to look like Patrick Waugh in your first start. But I think the bar that you're setting is just let me play well enough for my team to win. And that's what Brandon Bussey did last night. So mildly, I shouldn't say that I fully expected him to start, because I don't know, what's in Rod Brendamore's head. But I thought that Bussey earned it. And I was I wasn't really surprised that he started. I'll put it that way. But the why in all of this is interesting. If you listen to Rod Brindamore, this is not about Bussy outplaying Frederick Anderson and earning himself another start. This is about something else because Rob Brindamore scratched Freddie Anderson, was not available at all for last night's game, even in a backup capacity. Here's Brindamore as to why.
Minute conversation with our goalie coach, and so Freddie needs a little break. Okay. So we went with the other guy, and if you're going to give him a break, you need to give him a break. So to me, him dressing and going through all that, and just that's not really giving him a night off. So it's just, that's it.
Okay. Take that with a grain of salt. Because the way I look at it, either him needing a night off is some of this stuff that's going on building up. Don't forget his agent was Claude Lemieux. It's been a rough couple of weeks for him. So, is this bigger than just, hey, I need one night off? But also, I don't know how he can't be feeling some after effects of getting hit in the head by Barbashev in game 3. Like Rob Brindamore said he was fine, and that's all well and good, but Jared Bednar also told us that Cale Makar was fine. Okay, these hockey coaches, they just don't want to tell you anything when it comes to injury. Nothing. But he went as a healthy scratch. Could that be I don't know the reporting rules. Could that be gamesmanship? It's such a weird thing to do. I think that's the word I want to use. It's weird. It's weird to just give your number one goalie, who has been your number one goalie, just the night completely off, like not even in uniform, ready in an emergency situation. This is game 4 of the Stanley Cup final. You don't want everyone that is able-bodied to be available to you if need be. So I think there's something more here. I don't want to be conspiratorial. I'm not for a second delegitimizing either of those two scenarios. Like, if he has a head injury or he's still feeling the after effects of Ivan Barbashev, yeah, he shouldn't play. I'm not saying Rob Brindamore made the wrong decision. I'm just saying I don't think we're getting the whole story here. And those are the two things I'm certainly not downplaying what Frederick Anderson has been through lately. And if it is that, well, either way, you hope that it is just a one night thing because you want him to be healthy. But most importantly, your heart goes out to the guy for what he's been going through for the past couple of weeks, and you hope that he's all right in that way. But it just, healthy scratch, that's what I was surprised about. When I was driving home last night, and I'm listening to pregame coverage, and they're like, Brandon Bussy's going to start. I'm like, okay, good. I thought that was the right call. And then Elliot Friedman says it's a healthy scratch. And even the guys I was listening to, they said no, he's a scratch. He's a scratch. He could be hurt. No, he's a healthy scratch. So there's something that Rob Brindamore isn't telling. There has to be. I don't think I've ever seen this. So either it's, everything that he's dealing with personally, and he needed a night, which is okay. He's not as okay after the collision with Barbashev than what Rob Brindamore made it out to be, which, again, if he doesn't play, probably a good thing. Or the third option on why you make a decision like this, a healthy scratch, is you do this when you're sending a message. Right? You use that as a form of punishment. You're a healthy scratch tonight. We're not going to give you an out by saying you got an ankle, or it's hockey, so upper body, lower body. We're just going to call it what it is. You're a healthy scratch because we don't want you in our lineup. And while Freddie Anderson certainly hasn't impressed so far, he certainly hasn't been awful. So I don't think it's that. But again, there got to be a little bit more. A little bit more here. But the question obviously becomes, regardless of what's happening with Freddie Anderson, let's say that he's healthy, he doesn't need another night off, like he's ready. Do you go with Brandon Bussey again? I don't think that anything that Brandon Bussey did last night would make you say you absolutely have to stick with him. But I also don't think that anything he did disqualifies him. You know, I keep comparing it to the Avalanche goaltender situation throughout the playoffs. Like, if Mackenzie Blackwood would have come in at some point and played extremely well before Game 4 of the Vegas series, I would have said you got to stick with Mackenzie Blackwood. I just don't think that he did. I don't think that he differentiated himself with Scott Wedgwood enough to do it. But if you like Brandon Bussey last night may not have wowed. He made some big saves. I mean, you have to say that, but overall, the numbers, the underlying metrics weren't that much better than any game Freddie Anderson has started, but Freddie Anderson hasn't played to the point where you go, he has to be back in goal. So I'm really conflicted about this. And I don't think Rob Brind'Amour is as conflicted as I am. I think he's got a pretty clear idea. I think I go Bussey again. And the inevitable question of, if you want the Hurricanes to win and you're not thinking that Bussey completely implodes in goal at any point, yeah, I don't know that Frederik Andersen's going to get the net back. If it is one night, for whatever reason, that Freddie Anderson wasn't even suited up last night, if it is just the one night, listening to Rob Brind'Amour, it seems like he's going back to Freddie Anderson. I don't know that I would. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Bigger story, Canes, regardless of who is in goal, take get a game 4 win, 5-3, even up the series at 2 games apiece. Coming up next, we'll shift back toward the NBA Finals and why the groundwork is already being laid for Victor Wembanyama to quickly become maybe the most hated player in the NBA. So soon? Yes, so soon. He's got ties. He's got socks. Give him a gift that really rocks. $5,000 with our Top Pop contest. Just head to extrasports1300.com or kvor.com to enter this national contest for a chance to at $5,000 for your Top Pop. Sponsored locally by Papa Murphy's Pizza. We make it, you bake it. So we know that Victor Wembanyama has already become the next in a long line of villains at Madison Square Garden. In fact, he was asked the other night about it, and he made a joke about how he's not at Trae Young's level when it comes to that. But Miller, Trae Young, Wemby, and certainly the Knicks fans have every reason to make him out a villain for him throwing down Jalen Brunson. Absolutely. But I'm looking around the corner here because I've seen it. In this NBA culture, especially this NBA media culture, and social media and included in that. If Victor Wembanyama wins, he will immediately turn from a great story of a young superstar to being hated by a good number of NBA fans. How is this turn so possible? It's not because he threw down Jalen Brunson. Again, he should have been called for the foul. There should be consequences for your actions, but I understand the action because, Wemby has been dealing with this. Teams clutching and grabbing him, especially the smaller players like gnats, and he's finally swatting them away. I have no problem with Wemby doing it, and I just have a problem with the referee not making the call that should have been made out of that. You can commit a foul and send a message, and you could be okay with that, and I think Wemby was in that moment. Referee missed the call. I understand why Wemby did what he did when Jalen Brunson was grabbing at him. But it's going to be, we live in a time where everybody is a bit overexposed. I saw LeBron James say in an interview that he's not taking anyone over himself when it comes to the GOAT conversation. And I wouldn't expect LeBron James to say anything different. This isn't a headline. Of course he's going to take him. I mean, it's between him and Michael. So all he has to do in terms of his confidence level is take himself over one other guy. I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you? I have no problem with LeBron saying he would take himself in the GOAT debate. It's not a headline. But when you think about LeBron, and I know that there are things that he does that, rub people the wrong way. I've certainly been critical of LeBron James at times. I didn't love the whole Bronny thing. I did not like him going to Miami. Like, I am on board with a lot of people when it comes to some of the missteps in moments where you could be critical of LeBron James. But I think what he suffers from a lot, and I think it's harder for us who are a bit older, because I think the GOAT debate is going to be generational. It's just going to be that way. I have one of my sons that says Jordan's the GOAT. And maybe it's because, like Clockwork Orange, I taped his eyelids open and made him watch every minute of The Last Dance. And I said, this is your GOAT, over and over again. But he says Jordan's his guy. I would say he's in the minority, and he will be further in the minority every year that goes by. And I think part of the reason why we take Jordan, I'm not saying it's the number one reason, but part of the reason is because we are inundated with LeBron more than we ever were Michael Jordan. And I remember growing up, like Michael Jordan was he was on Oprah. He led Sports Center every night. Like for that time, nobody was covered more than more than Michael Jordan. But there just weren't the avenues, the outlets to cover him the way that LeBron is covered. And that's not LeBron's fault. Blame society. But we're so inundated with LeBron James and inundated with a lot of praise of LeBron James, which causes a lot of people to kind of turn. And I think that's what happens with these teams and these players. And it's going to happen with Wemby. I saw something that Ramona Shelburne wrote today, and Ramona is a good writer. But she wrote a story about how Wemby likes to go out, and he was in Gramercy Park the other day, I believe, right? Sketching. And look, if he, some people think it's performative, and they're already down the road of not liking Victor Wembanyama. I'm going to still go, like, the guy's allowed to go out on a day he has off and relax and unwind a little bit and do something that he likes. He played chess during the off season and stuff. Like, he should be allowed to do that. And just because his hobbies are a little weird to you, or would it be better if he was hitting up the most popular gentlemen's club in New York? Would you like that a little bit better? Like, the guy could go out and sketch some statues. Like, give the guy a break here. But when it's covered, it's one thing for someone to snap a picture of it and, oh, look, Wemby, and it, goes a little bit viral. But when you're using that to write a bigger story about Wemby and making him out to be like the savior of basketball. And Ramona Shelburne wrote about, had a line in there, how everybody was wearing shoes walking around in the Spurs locker room except Wemby, because he wanted to feel what it was like to win. Like, stuff like that does not help Wemby's case. And I get it. Look, I'm prone to hyperbole. It's kind of the nature of the business, but you have to understand, in the social media age, stuff like that is going to go viral. It's going to get amplified, and it's going to be used against a player like Victor Wembanyama. And then more people are thinking that him showing up and sketching statues or playing chess isn't anymore just what Wemby likes to do on his off days. It's going to be, it's performative. He wants to show everybody how deep he is. It's the Shaolin monk stuff. Like, but all of that in and of itself is not bad. In fact, I think a lot of Wemby's habits and what he chooses to do with his time is part of the reason why he's here at 22 years old. Already in his first NBA Finals, and may win it. But especially if he wins. And that's the other part too. We're very quick to tear down the team. We'll celebrate them as the winner, and then we want them gone. And in that way, I mean, maybe what's going on in the NBA is perfect. That every year it's a new champion. That the previous winner is not even getting back to the NBA Finals. Maybe that's perfect for our news cycle and everything like that, because we don't want the same. We want them to go away, and in the shelf life or the exposure of these champions is almost akin to what it would be if a team won back-to-back or 3 straight like the Bulls titles, because we're so inundated. And look, I'm not fixing all the world's things, and I'm not even telling you that you can't feel that way. I'm just saying it's the environment we live in, and I'm already seeing the signs here, the seeds are being planted of Victor Wembanyama quickly making a heel turn here for not really anything that he did other than be really good and covered a bit too much, which he doesn't ask for. So if the Spurs win, if they don't win, then it's all good. I think a lot of people can tolerate more of Wemby next year. But if the Spurs win, then it's going to turn very quickly over this offseason and into next year that now Victor Wembanyama, he's pretentious, right? He's pretentious. All of this is performative. He thinks he's better than everybody. I like the guy. I think it's kind of cool, the stuff that he does. And again, either way, if the Knicks win, it's a great story. If Wemby wins, it's a great story. I'm good either way. And this has been, with some of the extracurricular stuff that is really bad going on in New York City and stuff, the series itself has been great. This coming in from the 719. Inundated with LeBron, huh, Kaufman? Maybe you can set a trend by de-inundating him from your show. I feel like I bring him up when it's warranted. I'm good with the LeBron balance that I've struck. I also don't hate LeBron as much as you may hate him. So it doesn't bother me to necessarily bring him up as much as I do, which isn't as much as you might think. If you don't like LeBron, it sounds like I bring him up all the time. I'm good with the LeBron balance that I've struck. And I made it very clear, too. Michael Jordan is the GOAT. Nothing that LeBron can do is going to change that. Even him saying he's the GOAT is not going to change my mind. 719-24-7, 1313. Coming up next, Texas Tech, their athletic director and also their coach coming out in support of Brendan Sorsby, which is good. They should back a young man who seems to be going through a very difficult time and having some real issues. However, you can support him with also understanding why we're all so angry that he's going to be playing in Lubbock this fall. That's next on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. Cheer on Switchbacks FC and celebrate Men's Health Awareness Month this Saturday, June 13th against Sacramento Republic. The first fans through the gates will get a fun prop mustache. Kickoff is at 7. If you'd like to be there, I have tickets, a 4-pack of tickets to Saturday night's contest with Sacramento Republic. Be the 13th texter to text Switchbacks and your name to 719-247-1313. At long last tomorrow, Joe Sakic is going to speak with the media. It feels like it's been 3 months since the Avalanche season ended. So finally, Joe Sakic is going to speak, and he's going to speak by himself. At least he's not going to have Chris McFarland by his side. Now that he has taken back over general manager duties, and the buck is absolutely stopping with him. And who knows how many of the moves the Avalanche have made since Chris McFarland became the full-fledged GM. How many of those Joe Sakic co-signed? Was there disagreements? And maybe we'll never know. But there were enough of them. He's still the leader of that franchise. If you have a problem with some of these moves that the Avalanche have made, part of that's on Joe Sakic. So tomorrow he will answer questions. First and foremost, what are you doing with Jared Bednar? Extending him, letting him go into a lame duck year, you letting him go. And then a lot of discussion about where this team, what went wrong with this team, because we're also, I think, tomorrow going to get that, maybe that injury dump and find out what's truly ailing Cale Makar or what was ailing him. So we'll get Joe Sakic's take on what went wrong for the Avalanche against the Vegas Golden Knights, where they go from here. I would expect it to be very similar to the Nuggets postseason press conference. I don't expect this team to make major changes, including head coach. But I would be interested in Joe Sakic's perspective. Are we going to get basically the equivalent of Josh Kroenke saying this was the season that never was with the Nuggets? Is the sentiment the same with the Avalanche, that the only thing that kept them from their ultimate goal and kept them from being able to truly evaluate this team was injuries? I think it's a little bit harder when the Avalanche have been, for the vast majority of the season, pretty healthy. Nuggets seem more banged up this year, but when it got to the Western Conference Final, and their two best players suffered injuries. So Joe Sakic will speak tomorrow around noon, and that will be a big part of this show, plus talking about Game 4 of the NBA Finals, which is tonight at 6:30. Speaking of hockey, so talked yesterday about, is there really nobody else that's qualified to be an NHL head coach that the Oilers are knocking on Mike Babcock's door? And I felt that way when I thought that he resigned in Columbus because he wanted to see the pictures on his player's phone. I thought that's why he resigned. But multiple NHL insiders are coming out and saying, oh, no, that's not why. It's something else that forced him to resign. It's important, the mechanics of his exit in Columbus. He resigned. He did not get fired. He didn't retire. He resigned. So whatever it is, it could be worse than invading your player's privacy. Or maybe it's just another degree of invading your player's privacy. So the Oilers have had to, they checked with the NHL and NHLPA and said, are there any issues here? Well, it turns out the NHL, because Babcock resigned, didn't even conduct an investigation into what happened. There's like, he's gone, no point in us investigating it. So now they're going to investigate. Now they're going to get to the bottom of, if it wasn't the pictures on the phone thing, why Mike Babcock resigned from the Columbus Blue Jackets, and has the statute of limitations passed or whatever it is? Does it make it, their findings make it okay for the Oilers to hire Mike Babcock? And my question, in light of all this, is, are you so sure this is your guy that you're willing to go through all of this? I know, the Bruce Cassidy thing, they wouldn't even be thinking of Mike Babcock if Vegas probably was letting them speak to Bruce Cassidy. Okay, so I don't think Mike Babcock is their first choice. I think that's pretty clear. So you're going to go through all of this and have the NHL go to these lengths so you could get the go-ahead on Plan B? I mean, the Oilers, and then what are we going to find out? What are we going to find out that Mike Babcock did to force him to resign? And we're going to be like, oh, well, yeah, the Oilers should definitely hire this guy. And by the way, in a year where, if you recall, both Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid have called out the organization, this is their answer. A disgraced former coach. That's what they're going to do. That's who they're going to bring in. Now, you have to ask the question, why in the world is Connor McDavid on board with this? Well, because historically, Mike Babcock has had a very good relationship with his team's stars. Apparently, you're the good child. If you're a star player, then it becomes about Mike Babcock's hockey mind. And look, he's a brilliant hockey mind. No one's questioning that. But apparently, with his stars, historically, he's gotten along just fine. It's everybody else on the roster that's a problem. In Edmonton, I will say this, they shouldn't probably be caring too much about what their third and fourth liners are thinking right now when Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are taking shots across the bow at you. So I don't know that all this is worth it. But if David Carl's not going to leave DU, if the Vegas Golden Knights are going to let Edmonton talk to Bruce Cassidy, and they had to fire Chris Knobloch because it was leaked that they were going after Bruce Cassidy. I still say all that, and I still wonder, really? Him? This is your big answer. First, the investigation. Then we will reconvene and adjudicate this matter. But yeah, the NHL's like, oh, we'll get on that now. We'll go ahead and figure out get to the bottom of what happened in Columbus. I thought that they did. And I thought that it was the pictures on the phone thing. Apparently not. Apparently it's something else. It's like Cale Makar's injury. We all think it's the shoulder. No, we're being told it's not the shoulder. Okay, then what is it? So there's that. And then Texas Tech. Kirby Hocutt, the athletic director of Texas Tech, came out today with a statement in response to even schools within the same conference as Texas Tech going, like, we can't let this stand. What can we do? Do we just not play Texas Tech? Do we vote them off the island? I mean, all the options are on the table. The Big 12, to say nothing of the rest of the college sports world, they're like, this can't be allowed. For Brendan Sorsby to have bet on games of the team he was on at Indiana and be allowed to play, which is the side of the issue that most every rational human being on planet Earth is on the side of. But there is a part of this too where you don't, it's kind of like, I don't mean to make light of it, but it's kind of, I'm thinking of The Office where they're shutting down the Sabre store and Nellie is saying like, you can fire Todd Packer, but don't fire you can fire the manager, but don't fire the man. Like, if Brendan Sorsby is dealing with a gambling addiction, there's empathy towards that. We see what sports books are doing and who they're targeting and how so many young men are falling victim to it. And because they don't know, they can't control themselves. And that's a real problem. And for that, I hope Brendan Sorsby gets the help that he needs. And I hope that it stays on the right path and does not let this gambling addiction ruin his entire life or ruin the rest of his life. Because that's the key point here. At the same time, this part of his life has to be closed off to him. Playing college football. They can't let him do that. And Kirby Hocutt today, while he was talking about Brendan Sorsby as a human being, and I've heard a lot of things about how he's a really good guy and everything like that, and I'm not saying he's not. I don't know him. But a lot of the stuff about him, the human being, and I get all that, but you're using it as a shield against the real issue here. Is there a world where Brendan Sorsby can practice but not play with Texas Tech? If the judge ruled that the camaraderie of being on a college football team is what would be damaged and what would do him harm, is there a way to include him? You're looking out for him as the human being, and this has nothing to do with how good of a quarterback he is, Texas Tech. So is there a middle ground here where he can be a part of the team, that he could practice, he could go to team functions, but just not play? Can you essentially redshirt him for the rest of his career? And I'm not saying that there's a specific way. And Kirby Hocutt said that there's no perfect answer. And I agree, but there's many better answers than letting this guy play college football. Unfortunately, we have had instances of this in almost every sport. Betting and gambling on the sport, on the team. We've seen this. Jonte Porter, Pete Rose, the list goes on. Every one of them, the player in question is gone. Tell me why Brendan Sorsby should be different. So if Texas Tech were really looking out for him, and who knows, I'm not a psychologist or a doctor or anything like that, but, having more influence over the outcome of games, can that not be a little bit triggering? So I don't know, but I'm just saying, is there something else that they can do to get back this young man up, give him the support that he needs, make him feel a part of the team in some way, the camaraderie, all that kind of stuff, and he just doesn't step on the field on Saturdays? That's what Texas Tech should be looking at. But they're not. You know why? Because they're using all of this as a shield because they got a really good quarterback that might win them the Big 12 this year. And I'm sorry, Texas Tech, I don't want to hear anything from you. Because we are empathetic. We're not asking this guy to be thrown in prison. We're just saying the privilege of playing college sports should not be available to him anymore. He is free to be anything else that he chooses to be. And Texas Tech is a fine school that if he graduates, he can have a really good degree to get a really good job. But for Texas Tech to continue to talk about how they're doing, you know, they're like Mother Teresa. They're being charitable here and trying to support this guy. And I think that there are good, hearty people at Texas Tech that are legitimately wanting what's best for him. But when Texas Tech comes out and it's we're doing this for the person, we're doing this, you know, for his recovery and everything like that. Oh, he might win us a ton of football games. We haven't even really thought of this. Didn't really come to our minds. Like, come on. You stay on that side, Kirby Hocutt. We know where you're at. We know where your head coach is. We know where Cody Campbell is on this. It benefits you. This ruling benefits you. And so you're going to twist this around and make this out to be that you're trying to save the world one troubled young man at a time instead of you're just trying to win football games. So we don't want to hear it. It was egregious, the decision that was made. Something has to be done with that. I'm not speaking on legal grounds either. I think they had a legal reason to grant the injunction. I'm just saying he shouldn't be allowed to play college football. He shouldn't. And I don't want to, and Texas Tech is the last group of people I want to hear from in trying to convince me otherwise. Coming up next, something that is not infuriating. In fact, it's quite fun, and it's the Stanley Cup final. More on the Hurricanes' win last night.